Greetings, and welcome to another episode of The Real Monster D. That would be me. Yes. Are you suffering from Halloween withdrawal? Do you miss all the monsters? Are you in a spin for a lack of webs? Well, you have come to the right place, for I have a leftover treat for your trick. Yes. So, put your costume back on and grab a bowl of your favorite slightly stale snacks and have a seat, for I have a scary tale for you right now. Yes. A special Halloween treat. For all of you scary and horror fans out there, what is one thing that we all enjoy more than a good scare? It is a good sequel, right? What I'm going to propose right now is an idea for a new sequel to a classic. And that classic would be the movie C.H.U.D. Yes. Cannibalistic humanoid underground dwellers. Yes, I am going to talk about the idea of how to make a wonderful sequel to that classic. What? Who? Bud? No, not him. Ignore that Bud fellow. He's resting on the job. That does not count at all. No, I have a much more real, authentic sequel in mind for you. Yes, a great idea. And it is this: that we pit the monsters from C.H.U.D against none other than the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Yes. Far-fetched, you say? Oh, hardly. Just look at the comparisons between the two. I mean, where do the turtles live? In New York City. In the sewers. Where do the Chuds live? In New York City. In the sewers. Why, both of them have made manhole covers emblematic of their own visuals. There's a perfect fit for them to run into each other. Yes. And Ninja Turtles, while sometimes, quite often, being geared towards young children, has not been afraid to dabble in more adult, more garish themes from time to time, shall we say? Yes. So, I'm going to present this idea to you. Actually, in truth, you want to know something? It already happened. Yes, that is right. The Turtles and the Chuds have already clashed. Yes. Why, it was in the 2012 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles animated series. You know the one. Done in CGI? Yes. This occurred on the 5th and final season of the series. You see, they began to experiment with a different format for this final season, knowing that they were drawing for a close, and they also included a very snazzy, jazzy new intro. Yes. They broke this final season up into a series of little vignette episodes, experimenting with different styles, different types of storytelling, in some cases, different time periods and landscapes entirely. But the very first episode is entitled Scroll of the Demo Dragon. And this is where our creatures collide. It opens up with Raphael and the team's best friend, Casey Jones, tracking down a mysterious little creature cloaked in a mysterious hooded cloak. They track him down to a spot where it turns out there are many more of them. And yes, these are, in fact, the C.H.U.D monsters. While the story here, their motivation that they follow, is very different from the original movie, rather than just being about them mindlessly attacking passers-by, they actually have a singular directive here. You see, in this case, they fall under the leadership of a mysterious occultist who is bent on using them to help resurrect a interdimensional threat known as a demon dragon, Cavaxus. A major step this is from the old cannibalistic tendencies to something crazy and occult. And this may beg the question, how does one know that these creatures really are the original C.H.U.Ds? Well, let us look at the evidence. As previously mentioned, they are located in the same area as the turtles, the New York City sewer and subway systems, yes. But going even deeper, the origin of the C.H.U.Ds in the original movie was that they were somehow mutated homeless people who had been drifting and living under the sewers. Well, in this episode of the Ninja Turtles, there's a one-off line that talks about how there had been more and more homeless people being reported in the sewers. They brought up this very same connection between those two phenomena. Even further, now, I must note that these creatures were never officially called C.H.U.D in the episode, and I do not believe that they legally were able to, hence the reason they put the cloaks on, to hide their identity or to mask or muddle their form just enough to get away with it. But look at those precious faces close up. Tell me, these are not the same characters. Certainly a much closer cry than he whose name I shall not utter again. And it is not as though the 2012 series was at all a stranger to the concept of adding horror elements. No, the creators were massive horror fans, and they took every opportunity to implement such feelings and tendencies. They had Robert Englund of Freddy Krueger fame voicing a dream beaver, yes. They hired Jeffrey Combs to play the malevolent, monstrous version of the Rat King. And they bore the creation of something called the Creep, which is an obvious and direct homage to the slasher champion Jason Voorhees. Yes. And the great thing about considering this as a sequel to C.H.U.D, it's multifold. For one, this story was actually a four-parter, the only such thing in that final season. So, if you choose to treat this as a proper sequel to C.H.U.D, then it is almost feature-length anyway, so it's certainly enough to enjoy. And might I suggest a particular way to view and enjoy this? I suggest, especially if you have a family, to watch the original C.H.U.D late at night and enjoy and mull over that. Then, the next day, perhaps in the afternoon, when the children are awake, then you watch this Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles occult saga unfold. That way, you as adults get to enjoy the true horror, and then as a whole family, you get to enjoy the latter, with nary a nightmare to be had. Also, do make sure you order yourself a nice big pizza, but hold the stink bugs. Yes. Well, I hope this surprise, suspenseful sequel is enough to satiate your thirst for the Halloween horrors. Good evening. Are you in the mood for some monstrous metal you can really sink your teeth into? Well, I do believe I have something you can be thankful for right now. That is right. I am going to present you with 5 blood-curdling metal tracks, all inspired by vampires. Yes. It will be your updated playlist, which goes bump in the night. Let us dig right into this coffin. The very first song we have is off of the classic Blue Oyster Cult album, Spectres. And it is the ultimate track on this album, Nosferatu. And what can I say about this? This track is quintessential Blue Oyster Cult. That sort of low, slow, building, melodic sound with the eerie subject matter backing it behind. And the vocals just matching the perfect level of darkness. This track was the perfect way to end this album, to put you to bed wanting to leave perhaps another light or two on while clutching your garlic as tightly as your pillow. So Blue Oyster Cult's Nosferatu. My second vampiric track comes off of the Udo album, Steel Factory, and the song is called A Bite of Evil. Yes. In this song, singer Udo Dirk Schneider uses his signature snarling regalness, actually reserving his screeches and his screams in the beginning for a more deep, hallowed bellow. And he does this thing where every great once in a while he accentuates his words with what I can only describe as almost like a sheep's baa, but it works. No turning back. It is an amazing track that you must have heard in the dark. Next, I have... This is a release from the band Saxon, all the way from 1997 off of their Unleash the Beast album. And the song is called Blood Letter. See, what I love about this track, as well as this entire album, is, generally speaking, Saxon is not well known for their horror-related tracks and songs. They are much more suited to talking about rock and roll and machines and Renaissance or sort of period piece type times, you know, knights and swords and sorcerers and that sort of thing. So this stands out. With one or two exceptions, this album almost feels like this sort of gothic concept album in a way. And Blood Letter definitely lends itself. I mean, you know, coming right in between tracks like The Preacher and Cut Out the Disease. I mean, it's even written in a beautiful text that accentuates its sort of classic horror nature. And Blood Letter itself is actually a relentless, speedy romp. It is the epitome of the idea of a vampire actually chasing you, perhaps through the woods or perhaps through some dark, late, winding streets. You can feel this fang fiend right at the back of your neck as this song closes in on you. Yes. Next, let's see what we have now. Oh, it's a favorite of mine. This is off of the album Defenders of the Faith by Judas Priest. And the song is called Love Bites. This one is beautiful. When you feel safe and when you feel warm, you clearly are not listening to this track. Now, it's funny. I mentioned the song Nosferatu earlier, but I once saw them play this song live, and as they were playing, they had a rear projector that actually had scenes from the old silent film Nosferatu. Stacked up perfectly with this. This, to me, is one of those songs that is dark, yet also presents its subject matter with a bit of fun. It's for Judas Priest, and for this particular set, it is a bit lighter, but still maintains a certain gothic heaviness as well. Highly recommend Love Bites. Because this track certainly does not bite. And one more track. Oh. How about that? So we began this list with the Blue Oyster Cult song Nosferatu, and now the Saxon Boys are back yet again with a song called Nosferatu off of their last album, Thunderbolt. Now, this Nosferatu takes things definitely not nearly as fast and speedy as Blood Letter, and somehow manages to pump up the more gothic sort of classical feel, and even having sort of a faux orchestra backing it. Now, on this particular version of the album, you actually get two renditions of the song. You get the, they call it the Vampire's Waltz, Nosferatu, which has the sort of orchestral, tinges, but then they have the raw version, which is essentially just the Saxon Boys plugging away at it. So you get to pick your fang poison on this one. So this is almost two vampires for the price of one. Excellent. So these be my 5 fang friends. Let them fly into your next fiendish playlist. And enjoy your blood curdling. Yes. Welcome to the drawing challenge. I thought it might be appropriate to go out with a boo for this video. Yes. As in, today I am going to draw a monster which may very well be the scariest monster of all. To me. What do I mean by that? Well, today I'm going to draw that tormentor of all children in the night and in their dreams, the boogeyman. Yes. I feel like almost all of us have a version of this character. And what it really comes down to is this nightmarish figure who haunts your dreams. And you may or may not, as a child, have thought there was a boogeyman under your bed or in your closet or somewhere way too close for comfort. Keep your safe social distance, Mr. Boogeyman. So, what that means for me is I am essentially going to draw the scariest monster to me. This thing is going to represent something that actually sends chills up my very own monster spine. You might be thinking, what could that be? And well, perhaps we'll find out. So I'm going to draw my own personal boogeyman in 5 minutes or less. So, let me start that timer now. And time has begun. Alright. Let's see. And let me begin. So when you hear about the boogeyman, what does that make you think of? Anything in particular? What terrifies you the most? Or is there something that used to terrify you that perhaps terrifies you less now? Sort of like seeing a scary movie as a child and then growing old and later on you realize, oh, this movie actually is not all that bad. And in fact, now I enjoy it. Have you had such an experience? Perhaps even nightmares, as rough as they are in the moment, when you take time to reflect upon them later on, can actually be somewhat entertaining. If nothing else, they wind up being memorable, which is to account for something, right? Alright. So, as I'm drawing my boogeyman, I'm thinking about something that I find particularly unnerving and unsettling, and really honing in on that. Let me see here. And this might actually be a combination of a couple of things that bother me. Or have bothered me anyway. So are you old enough that you have officially stopped getting visits from your boogeyman, or is that something that still happens for you? Or perhaps you have made peace with your boogeyman. Let's see here. This is going to have quite an unusual explanation when I am done with it here, huh? This is actually a combination, really, between two things that have terrified me to different degrees. One thing that still makes me a little unnerved, and then something that I used to see when I was much, much younger, but I have not in a very long time. I hope that this drawing does not suddenly restir that old occurrence, but if it does, again, it'll be another memory, right? And perhaps that will lead to another future video. What do you say? Would you like to learn all about Monster D's dreams? Well, this one is going to teach you about one of them at the very least. A little bit of shade and weight there in this thing. You might already be seeing some familiar forms here going on. Alright. This is looking pretty squirmy already, huh? What real life thing makes you think of squirmy when you hear that word? I have to imagine just about only one thing, right? I have a feeling you already know. But with this particular drawing, not totally. Alright, here we go, here we go. Oh, look at that. I'll sign here, and this is my boogeyman. But what is it? Well, can you figure out what these parts here are? Oh, I'm sure you already have. Yes, they are of a worm, just a common earthworm. It may sound weird because I've done so many videos on insects and spiders and snakes and other various creatures and even worms as well. And almost none of those bother me, yet for some reason worms do. Something about how loose their skin is and how limp they are if you happen to pick them up, which I do not go out of my way to accomplish, I must admit. I mean, I have held them, and if I really, really need to prove a point or to teach something, I will. I certainly do not hate them. I respect them. They're important creatures, but I just feel a little unnerved when I'm around them. Do you have something like that? Something you might be a little afraid of, but you cannot really explain why? But the other part is this face in the middle here. That might be the stranger part for you, right? When I was a very, very young child, I used to have this dream. It was a recurring dream, maybe 2 or 3 times at least, where I would wake up and I would look behind my bed because there was a gap between the post of my bed and the wall, and from between that gap, this face would appear. almost like a semi-translucent mask on a head, and it was generally female sort of formed. And yes, that happened a few times, and that used to bother me quite a bit. So, yeah, as putting this together, I figured I would combine the worm with that weird mask face, and that would be my personal boogeyman in 5 minutes. So, how about you? What would your boogeyman look like? Feel free to describe this boogeyman in the comments below. Also, please do give this video a like if indeed you did like it, and toll that bell so you can be ready, willing, and salivating for the very next episode of The Real Monster D. Thank you, and stay monstrous.